أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. We continue with verse number 27 of Surah Al Imran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. You make the night pass into the day, and you make the day pass into the night. You bring forth the living from the dead, and you bring forth the dead from the living, and you provide for whoever you wish without any reckoning. We discussed about the first part of the verse in our last session. Now, about تخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي. You bring forth the living from the dead and bring forth the dead from the living. Usually the Mufassirun give two meanings to it. One is a more literal meaning, and the other a bit metaphorical meaning. The literal meaning is that before we have life when we are as a fetus, before the soul is blown, the ruh is blown into our body, we are dead. We exist, but we are dead. And after the soul is blown, that usually they say it happens after 4 months, then we become alive. Although, of course, we are very tiny, our movement is very limited, our life is very restricted. However, we are living. So they say, يخرج الحي من الميت means يخرج الحي من النطفة. The nutfa, the fetus before the soul is blown into it. And that's mita. يخرج الحي من الميت. And also يخرج الميت من الحي. When we are alive, when we become living, walking on the earth, then of course the dead corpse is brought forth from us. يخرج الميت من الحي. The other meaning, which I said is a bit metaphorical, is they take hay for a mu'min and mayyat for a kafir. Why? Because hayat has different levels. Life has different levels. And one level of life is when we become aware of Allah and commit ourselves to Him. And we become mu'min. And for Iman, we have a higher grade of life. Before Iman, we have that lower grade of life. Of course, we live as other living animals. We have, of course, extra abilities than animals as human beings. However, we don't have that life which comes through faith. So that's why in the words of many exegetes and also reports from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq and Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, his blessed father, they have said that another meaning of this يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت تخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي is إخراج المؤمن من الكافر والكافر من المؤمن. A believing person may have a child who is non-believing, who is a disbeliever, and vice versa. A disbeliever may have a child who is a believer. And we said that the believer has a higher grade of life, and is life in essence, life of a spiritual connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he brings forth the believer from disbeliever, and the disbeliever from the believer. And this is what we know happening all the time during the history. We know about many great prophets who had children disbelieving, and vice versa. We had disbelievers who had children who were very committed believers. So this is another meaning of تخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي. Hayat, as I said, has different grades. When we are in the wombs of our mothers, we have hayat, but that hayat is very restricted. When we come to this world as child, we have hayat, but that's very restricted as well. As we learn more, our hayat is upgraded, our understanding, our awareness. When we die, our hayat is uplifted. The life becomes richer, stronger, and that our awareness, our comprehension, they all are enhanced. And as Allah says in the Quran, وَمَا هَذِهِ الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ لَهِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. The true life, the life with its full capacity, with its enriched quality, could be found in Akhirah. Here we have life, but it's just like play and sport. It doesn't follow any purpose. It doesn't find any real meaning. Although we have purpose in our life, we have many ambitions to fulfill. However, these are all perishable, and therefore it's just like a play. And the last sentence of the verses, وَتَرْزُقُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. And you provide for anyone, for whoever you wish, without any reckoning. What does this mean? Without any reckoning. Now, we have a quote from Maryam in Surah Maryam as well, when he speaks to Zakaria, when Zakaria asks him, Ya Maryam, anna laka hadha? Where are these fruits and foods coming for you from? قال إنه من عند الله إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب. Allah provides, this is from Allah, Allah provides for whomever He wishes without reckoning. Now, so if we look at that verse, it shows that sometimes the rizq and provision comes without its ordinary channel. And this is بغير حساب. This is against all probabilities that we know. And it is not restricted to the story of Maryam. Sometimes our rizq comes from من حيث لا يحتسب or من حيث لا يحتسب. It comes from where we never expected. This is بغير حساب. Because usually we have account of our income, we have speculation about what we earn over the year, and suddenly something comes outside that counting that we have, that expectation. This is بغير حساب. However, another meaning has been mentioned for إن الله يرزق من يشاء بغير حساب, and that is, when we want to deal when we have properties, money, bank account, and we want to spend, we usually keep the account for it. Why? Because we should know how much we have spent so that we wouldn't run out of cash or wouldn't run out of resources. We always need to keep, even if we are a billionaire, we need to keep the account of how much we spend so that we don't go bankrupt. We don't run out of resources. However, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because His resources are endless and are not restricted, then He doesn't need to keep account of it. He can just give without keeping any record, without reckoning. And that's probably the meaning of وَتَرْزُقُ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Both meanings are probable here. Out of expectation, out of probabilities of life, and without keeping an account or a record for it, because you don't need to keep record for your resources, because your resources are limitless. Okay, now after mentioning this, which comes in form of a dua, قُلِ اللَّهُمَّ مَالِكَ الْمُلْكِ, which is an allusion to the Ahlul Kitab who were discussing with the Prophet. Now Allah, the Quran, the verses turn to the type of relationship of Muslims with those Ahlul Kitab or Mushrikun or whoever is from other faiths, if they are enemies. How should we deal with them? Verse number 28. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك فليس من الله في شيء إلا أن تتقوا منهم تقاه ويحذركم الله نفسه وإلى الله المصير. The faithful should not take the faithless for allies, awliya. Now, one meaning of awliya is allies, another meaning is friend, another meaning is intimate and close partner or whatever. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين ومن يفعل ذلك, and whoever does that, Allah will have nothing to do with him. فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. This is bara'ah from Allah. Allah disowns them. That means they are not mu'min. لَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ means they are not mu'min. They may claim they are mu'minun, but they are not mu'min. إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَاهُ, except when you are wary of them, out of caution. وَيُحَذِّرُكُمُ اللَّهُ نَفْسَهُ. Allah warns you to beware of disobeying Him, and towards Allah is the return. Now, this verse, first of all, this is one of the verses which talks about taqiyya. And taqiyya is an important matter which has been brought up in the Quran, has been mentioned in the Quran several times. It's not something which is related to Shia only. I will discuss later on why Shias have become famous for taqiyya rather than other madhahib. But this is not something related to madhab. This is something related to Islam. Taqiyya is something related to Islam. إِلَّا أَن تَتَّقُوا مِنْهُمْ تُقَى. The other thing is about this wilaya of kafir. And wilaya may mean guardianship, may mean friendship, may mean alliance, and things like that. The important matter here is that, as Sheikh Mughni rahmatullah alayhi mentions, Allah doesn't say that it is haram to do it. Because when we say it's haram, we are talking about mu'minun. Haram and halal pertains to the believers. Allah doesn't say that it's haram. He says you go out of faith. So I don't say that it's haram. I just disown you. You just go out of faith. What he says, Marhum Mughniya, he says, لم يكتف سبحانه بالنحي عن موالاة الكافر. Allah has not just limited himself to prohibit muwalat of kafir. I mentioned what muwalat means. As I said, it may mean alliance, friendship, and other things. He doesn't say that it's haram, like, for example, lying is haram or ghaiba, backbiting is haram. No. It says that it is kufr. Why? Because it says, وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَلَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. And this means bara'ah of Allah from this person. And bara'ah is from kafirin and mushrikeen. Of course, not from the mu'mineen. Also in Surah Ma'idah, Allah says with regards to this tawalli or wilaya or muwalat, وَمَنْ يَتَوَلَّهُمْ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Anyone who have this muwalat towards kafirun is from them, is one of them. It means I do not accept his Islam. He may pray, he may fast, but if they have muwalat, wilaya of kuffar, then I don't regard them as believers. Also in Surah Al verse number 22, لا تجد قوما يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر يوادون من حاد الله ورسوله. You will not find anyone believing, any people believing in Allah and the Day of Judgment, that they would have mawaddah for those who fight against Allah and His Messenger, even if they are their fathers, their sons, their brothers, or their families. So these are very strong verses against the muwalat of a believer towards a non-believer, whether they are Ahlul Kitab or Mushrikun or other people of no faith or whatever. However, what does this mean? These verses are very explicit. However, on the other hand, we know that we are commanded by Allah that we need to befriend with everyone. We need to قُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, treat people nicely, no matter what their faith is. So what is that which is targeted by this verse? Now Mughniya says Muwalatul Kafir has different types. Some of them are acceptable, some of them are not acceptable. This is very important. Please pay attention carefully, because many of us are confused in this matter. So, he says that anyone saying La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah is a Muslim. And all the rules of Muslimun would apply to them, except in few cases. One of them is Muwalatul Kafirin. If you are Muwalat for disbelievers, whatever you want to translate Muwalat as alliance, friendship, guardianship, whatever. Because the verse says, no matter you call yourself believer or not, if you have Muwalat for Kafir, I don't accept that. You are a Kafir. لَيْسَ مِنَ اللَّهِ فِي شَيْءٍ. They are not, as the English translation here has it, Allah will have nothing to do with him. It means that there's no relation. The claim is not accepted. Now he says that, okay, what are different types of tawalli? One is that you are quite happy with their kufr. For example, they worship idols. You say, well, that's a nice thing. Of course, I'm a Muslim, I don't do that, but that's a nice thing. That's a good thing to do. لأن الرضا بالكفر كفر. If you are happy with kufr, you are a kafir. This is one meaning. He says this is one meaning of muwalat, which takes you out of faith. That anyone saying anything, for example, with regards to God, faith, worship, you say, well, it's nice, it's good. I would have done that as well. So, because we have become believers in Islam to abide ourselves by certain limits and boundaries of ideology, faith, our understanding of God. So if we are just happy with everything, that would take us out of. This is what Mughniya says. The second is that أن يتقرب إلى الكافرين على حساب الدين, to compromise their faith with kafir. And that is, for example, the kuffar doesn't like us to do certain things which are part of our tenets in Islam. To please them, we don't do that. Or to please them, we do not believe in certain parts of our aqidah. This is another type of tawalli, which he says is not acceptable and would take a person outside faith. The third type of tawalli is that you become a spy and a fifth column for the kafirin. Not for money. If you do that for money, that you become a fasiq. You are a disbeliever, you have your faith, but you do this, it's haram to do it, you become a fasiq. But to do it because you like the way they live and you don't like Muslimun. You don't like the i'tiqadat of the faith of Muslimun. This takes you out of faith, although you are born a Muslim. The fourth type of tawalli, these are the three types of tawalli which he says are the subject of this verse, or what this verse is talking about. There are other types of tawalli. He says other types of tawalli are quite fine. One type of tawalli is friendship. You become a friend with an unbeliever. In your daily life, you have business together, you are neighbors, for example, you are classmates. You have to show good akhlaq, honesty, you have to be trustful towards them. And this is the duty of a Muslim towards a non-Muslim. This friendship, he says, of course, this is what the Quran advises us to do. So, لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين doesn't mean that you should not be friends with any non-believer. You should not be good to your neighbor. You should not, for example, visit your friends who are not believers. He says, وَهَذِهِ الصَّدَاقَةُ جَائِزَةٌ بِالْإِجْمَاعِ. This is the consensus of all ulama in Islam, not in Shia, in Islam. In Shia, in Sunni, in other faiths, the madhahib. Because, he says, because to have friendship with a kafir is haram when they lead you to kufr. If they do not lead you to kufr, it's not haram. It's not ma'siyah. And then he says that we have verses in the Quran which allows us, not only allows us, it encourages us to do that. Like, for example, in Surah Mumtahana, أَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَ الَّذِينَ عَادَيْتُم مِّنْهُمْ مَوَدَّةً. How do you know? Maybe Allah will create friendship, mawadda. Mawadda is strong friendship, isn't it, between you and them. Wallahu qadir, wallahu ghafurun rahim. لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين. Allah is not prohibiting you to have this mawadda from those who haven't fought you on the account of your faith. وَلَمْ يُخْرِجُكُم مِّن دِيَارِكُمْ, and have not driven you out of your homes. أَن تَبَرُّوهُمْ وَتُقْسِطُوا إِلَيْهِمْ, that you be good to them and you do justice in your relationship with them. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Allah loves that. love that. So this type of wilaya doesn't go under the verse which is talking about the impermissibility of wilayatul mu'mineen la yattakhidul mu'minun al-kafirin awliya min dun al-mu'minin. This doesn't go under that. And there's a fifth type of wilaya which is also permissible, and that is when you ally with kuffar, with the non-believer community, to fight those who are fighting you on account of your faith, and those who are fighting you because you are a Muslim, they fight you as kuffar. And you ally with some other kuffar who have no enmity, who have no enmity with you. It's fine. And he says this is what? هذه الاستعانة جائزة بالإجماع. This is consensus of all Muslims. That is permissible. And also, we know that the Prophet, peace be on him, allied with Khuza'ah, although they were mushrikun, and sought help of others who were not fighting against him. Also, he allied with the Jews of Bani Qaynuqa and gave them some money so that they help him in one matter. Allama al-Hilli, he says, even Allama al-Hilli mentions that if there is a Muslim community which are zalim, they are wrongdoers, and they attack your community to wrong you, and you seek the help of non-believers to expel them. Allama says this is even wajib. Even this one is, this is even jais, is permissible. Because this is for ihqaqul haqq. You want to establish haqq by that. So, to summarize, the muwalat which is mentioned in this verse is alluding to certain type of muwalat, not to any type of muwalat. Here it says the faithless should not take the faithful should not take the faithless for allies. However, as I discussed, sometimes even the alliance is permissible, let alone friendship. Even alliance is permissible sometimes. What Marhum Mughniya mentions is that in 3 cases, of course, this muwalat is haram. Not only haram, it takes you out of faith. And in 2 cases, it is permissible. And in 1 case, it is highly recommended. And that is when you are living, whether in a Muslim community, among minorities of other faiths, or in a non-Muslim community, among the majority of disbelievers, it's good to have acceptable and honest relationship, mawadda, friendship with them. Extend your friendship and love towards them. That's fine. And then he says, this is very interesting, and he says that when we talk about kafir, we are not talking about objects, we are talking about human beings. And sometimes we find some human beings among the kuffar with such an integrity of character, with such an honesty, with such an loyalty in their friendship, that they exceed these qualities that we could find among Muslims. So why should we think that we have to betray them? We have to take possession of whatever they have. And that's the silly thing that sometimes some people say. This is, of course, not permissible. You have heard that story of Imam Ali and the Jewish man who just happened to travel together. And when they were parting, Imam Ali followed him on his path for a while. And then the man said, "Were you not going to Kufa? This is not the way to Kufa." He said, "Yes, but our Prophet have said that when we accompany someone, even for a short while, when we want to part, we better see them off for a while." And that man was a Jewish person, and Imam Ali was the caliph of the Muslim territory. So this is good akhlaq that we have to learn from Imam Ali alayhi salam. Then the verse says, "Illa an tattaqu minhum tuqa." In those three cases, which is not allowed to have alliance or friendship, we say muwalat, with the kuffar, it makes it permissible if you are wary of them, if you fear for your life. Now about taqiyya, we need to expand on the subject, on the concept of taqiyya, from the verses of the Quran and some of the ahadith that which we leave for our next session. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Sheikh, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have some time for the questions. So if anyone has any questions, please either post them on the YouTube or on the Zoom. If you wish to ask them yourself, also please feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question to Sheikh as well. So we have one question in the chat, so I will read it out. Regarding tawalli of the non-believer and spying for them, does that also extend to the case where there is some wrongdoing in your community and you want to tell the government about it? Must this be handled internally only?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, no. I mean, if you want to report a crime or something, that's not a spying, certainly. This is between two different communities. When one community is non-believer and another community is believer, and you spy for them. Especially this goes with different countries. I mean, if you spy for a non-believer country over a believing nation, that would be espionage. With regards to Muslims living as minority in non-believer societies, I mean, if there's a crime, anything which is to do with a judicial system, of course, certainly that should be reported. That's a routine thing. However, if there are certain, say, for example, private information from inside a community, and you reveal that so that you spoil it, so that you somehow stop that process to go, then that should be. I mean, tawalli is a very familiar name. It is a very understandable sort of concept that you take side with a non-believer against a believer. This is tawalli.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. We discussed the concept of awliya and the different kind of meanings it could have. In terms of the meaning of kafir, is that taken in the fiqhi sense of meaning someone who doesn't believe in Allah and the Prophet, or could it be slightly different to that?
Well, kafir has a very clear meaning, and that is whoever does not believe in the prophethood of Prophet Muhammad. Because, I mean, there are other faiths who believe in God, who believe in unity of God, but if they do not believe in the messenger, Prophet Muhammad as a messenger, then that is a kafir. It doesn't mean because he's kafir he's a bad person. Doesn't mean because he's a kafir he goes to hell, because the judgment is with Allah. There are many different factors which come into that. However, according to fiqh, according to definition, he is a kafir. Now, if that kafir has interests to harm Muslim community, if that kafir is part of the a community who is in trouble with Muslim community. In terms of ordinary friendship, that's fine. For example, they are your neighbors, they are your friends, it's fine. But if it is something between two communities and you divulge things to them, you take sides with them, in that respect, in respect of faith, that's very important. Then, of course, this is tawalli, which is not permissible.
And also expanding that to the concept of mu'min as well. How would we look at what a mu'min is?
Sorry, I lost your voice.
Sorry, how would we also define a mu'min?
As I mentioned, I quoted Sheikh Mughniya, anyone who says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, we regard them as a Muslim. Mu'min is different thing. Here we are not talking with mu'mineen, we are talking about Muslims, okay, Muslim community. So anyone declaring that La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah is a Muslim. Now, there are certain things which somehow take them out of that definition. One of them is this tawalli with kuffar. That is one aspect of, or one factor which takes someone out of Muslim community. If we want to define a mu'min, then that's a different thing, because mu'min has extra definition, extra qualities they should have. And it's not a point of discussion here, I think.
So is there a reason the term mu'min is used instead of Muslim over here?
Well, I think it is used synonymously with Muslims, because mu'minun here are the Muslim community of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. It's not talking about any community other than that. لا يتخذ المؤمنون الكافرين أولياء من دون المؤمنين. This is talking about the mu'mineen of the time of the Prophet, who are, of course, Muslimun. And mu'minun is sometimes used in a very general sense. So, like, for example, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu. We know that Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu was addressed towards those with very high level of faith, those with low level of faith. Even the munafiqun sometimes were included in the address of Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu.
Thank you very much. In terms of towards the middle of this verse where it says, except when you are wary of them. What does this wariness mean? How are we to make sure that we have the correct kind of wariness?
Well, it's to fear for one's own life or severe harm. If one fears for their life or severe harm, then that is the wariness which is mentioned here. Inshallah, I will talk next week in details about this, because I want to talk about taqiyya and what taqiyya is, this to be wary, and what are its conditions. Inshallah, I will talk about that next week.
Again, a question from the chat. Why do you think the ayah was pointed to the mu'mineen and not the Muslims when the person is mu'min? It means has reached a good understanding of the religion and assumed will not make kufr.
Well, you know, the Quran usually uses mu'minun for the Muslim community. addresses them with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. It doesn't say Ya ayyuhal muslimun, never. It says Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. Also, when it wants to talk about relationship, it says mu'minun, for example, have such relationship with disbelievers. Especially in this ayah, it's very clear, La yatakhadul mu'minun al-kafirin. The Quran doesn't make any difference here because it assumes that everyone in the community deserves to be called a mu'min. Although, I mean, this is the sort of generosity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling everyone as mu'minun. However, we know that this, when it says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, the address is towards the Muslim community of the time of the Prophet. Now, later on, of course, when it developed, there were some Muslims who didn't have good faith. From a theological point of view, we differentiated between Muslim and Mu'min and said Muslim who is someone who declares by tongue, and Mu'min is someone who has faith in his heart. Then it is used in another surah in Quran as well. قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. The Bedouins say that we have faith, say that no, you have submitted. You are Muslimun, not Mu'minun. However, if Allah wants to address them, He addresses them as Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu as well.
Another question from the chat. So you said we shouldn't side with non-believers in matters of faith. Does this extend to the community as well? So we shouldn't go around speaking against one community to non-Muslims?
Well, we shouldn't speak about our community to anyone, actually, against our community to anyone, actually. But if these are somehow private information of Muslims, which divulging them would harm that community, yes, of course, we shouldn't do that. It depends with what purpose we do it. If this is for tawalli, if this is because we see Muslim community not deserving that privacy, and we think that a non-Muslim community must somehow take action about that community, then this is tawalli, which is haram.
Thank you. Coming to the previous verse, we mentioned this providing reckoning for whomever he wishes without any reckoning.
Yes.
So does this not support the Ash'ari concept of justice?
What do you mean by Ash'ari concept of justice?
So the notion that Allah can decide, He can say what is good wherever He wants, and what Allah says is what is good, rather than.
No, that's a completely different thing. You know, that's a completely different thing. Here we say that Allah has somehow infinite resources, and He decides to give how much to who. This is not about justice. This is not about human free will or action or anything like that. For example, to someone He gives life for a lifespan of 50 years. To another one, He gives a lifespan of 70 years, for example. Or someone is more intelligent than others. These differences are the part and parcel of creation. And we cannot say that this somehow stops the free will of people, or this is injustice, because injustice is when people deserve something and Allah doesn't give them. We don't deserve anything. He decides to give how much to who.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have any more questions. So inshallah, we bring the session to a close here. Thank you very much, Sheikh, again for joining us. Inshallah, we continue again same time next week.
Inshallah. Thank you so much. Fi amanillah. Khuda hafiz.
Ya Allah. Khuda hafiz.